particularly concerned about addressing this, first of all, the definition of what is trafficking, and then the scope of the problem. And also discussing, particularly, although sex trafficking gets the headlines, labor trafficking is also a big issue. I don't know how they compare, and frankly, when you're talking about something that's illegal, it's probably not possible to give precise numbers. But the other thing that I particularly would like to hear about is numbers for the state of California, insofar as we can get them. The only numbers I have so far that I can really relate to is that the number of people in prison for human trafficking offenses, that is sections PC 236 primarily, and there's about 150 of them. There's also about 180 people in jail for pimping and pampering, which could be also human trafficking. So it's about 330 people in jail for that. Is this the tip of the iceberg, or is this indicative of sort of the level of the problem? It's obviously a big problem, whether the number is 330 or 3,000. But if we can get some idea of the extent to which we are able to judge the size of the problem, looking at labor versus sex trafficking, and how much do we think is out there that where we haven't put these folks behind bars yet. We have 150. Are there many, many more out there? So if you could address those issues in particular, please go ahead with whatever prepared statement you have, and then I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say. Thank you. So, Robert.
Yes, good morning. Robert Sumner with Attorney General Kamala Harris's office, and I'm happy to speak to those points. I'm also very grateful for the opportunity to be on this panel. I think that the rest of the agenda is just made up of really great experts from the human trafficking fight. So I appreciate the opportunity. And I'll be brief in terms of the history, but just to go over what we have at the state level through the Department of Justice on human trafficking. What we really looked at is we looked at the time frame of 2010 to 2012. We had a number of regional task forces the Department of Justice partnered with, and we were able to look at the numbers that they had in terms of their investigations, in addition to our interactions with local law enforcement to see what was being done at the county level, at the city level, and through more localized federal efforts. The first numbers that we were able to get from that is from 2010 to 2012, the regional task forces for human trafficking arrested 1,798 perpetrators suspected of human trafficking. In addition to that, there was an identification of some 1,277 victims. So as far as California...
Could you give me those numbers again?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, and of course I'm happy to provide my remarks to staff, but it's 1,798 perpetrators and 1,000... Sorry?
Go ahead. So 1,798...
perpetrators and 1,277 victims.
1,207. But we only have about 90 folks in prison. Why is that number so different?
So to speak to that, first of all, the way that those numbers were reached is this was the result of a survey of 9 regional task forces that were operated specifically on human trafficking. And they had investigations that resulted in arrests that were operated, not necessarily at the state level when you consider that these were federal task forces. A lot of this would be a federal crime as opposed to the state crime of 236.1 within the penal code. So I don't think that there's a direct correlation between what our local, for example, district attorney's offices have been able to accomplish, considering it's, kind of a parallel track with the federal government, which for a long time has had kind of original jurisdiction over the human trafficking issue because they, were able to operate based on laws that weren't passed in California yet prior to 2005.
All right. So these people were then prosecuted in federal court?
Well, many of them would be. The number of perpetrators is an arrest number. And it's from 2010 to 2012, and from that day, I can't speak to how many of those resulted in a conviction.
Yeah. Again, there's only 90 people in prison, so how do we get from 1798? Are they going to federal prison, or?
Potentially. We have strong partnerships.
Or are these, the problem is we get the conflation between pimping and human trafficking. And there are 182 people in prison for pimping and pampering. plus another 61 for pimping and pandering youth, so about 240. But that's all very different from 1798. So I'm just trying to figure out, everybody knows I'm the numbers guy. I have a degree in physics. And I'm just trying to put all these things in perspective. And 90 under 236 and roughly 140 under 143 under 266. So 90 as human trafficking, 243 under 266 pimping and pandering, of which 61 are for minors. It's just a large difference. In doing the reading for this, what I found is that nobody seems to have numbers that agree with anybody
Just
else.
remember, if you need money, I am in share budgets of 5, so don't worry about the money. Just worry about solving the problem. So if you can see from the passion of everyone on this committee, Assemblyman Santiago, this is really important. And if there's something you can't answer now, or to be able to get back to me, I would love to see a budget package or something, so that the reason for this is so that we can actually tackle the problem this year. That was the promise we made to several members of this committee.
And that's a topic that I'll definitely be following up with your office on. We have a number of task forces we've been hoping to find funding for through our Division of Law Enforcement that deal with these kind of complex organizations that regularly deal in guns, drugs, and human beings specifically. So we'll definitely be happy to follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Everybody knows I'm the numbers guy. I have a degree in physics. And I'm just trying to put all these things in perspective. And if you can get back to me at some time, we can go over the statistics, the numbers, and try and figure out why everybody who reports on this seems to give a different number for what the problem is. We can get into sort of a micro level of these 1,798. What is it they did? Where are the victims coming from, etc., or a number of others you want to look at. If we could just look at this on the micro level, try and understand whether we're comparing apples and oranges, what exactly the crimes are. The other thing is, you mentioned 1,798 folks as perpetrators, 1,277 as victims. Do you have any breakdown as to what is labor trafficking versus sex trafficking? That is a question. Can you answer?
No, but I'd be happy to look into that as well.
Okay, so let's, as people know, I'm a numbers guy, and I really would like to see that.
Since 2006, we have charged 467 defendants with child sex trafficking. We have already concluded 415 of those cases, which resulted in 339 convictions. And we still have 65 cases pending, and that's as of September 1. So we do know that so far in the county since 2011, we have worked with 529 youth. Only about 2% of those are boys, but we can't forget that boys are being sex trafficked also. They just present differently in our system. We also have a bill before you, which I am sponsoring at Senator Huff is carrying, that's really a data bill. Because right now we don't have statewide. I have good numbers. Statewide, we do not. And this is a data bill that will just break down what the sections are in the commercial sex world, so that we know who's an adult who's working and soliciting, who's an adult who's soliciting to purchase sex with an adult worker, and who's soliciting sex with a minor. There's no differentiation in the law right now. And until we start breaking it down by those three categories to start, we won't be able to get good data, because we'll be taking out our number 2 pencil and a ledger to try to figure it out. So I'm hoping that legislation moves forward. I think it'll be critical.
Thank you. You and I will sit down and have a great discussion on the numbers, and I look forward to that. Everybody knows I'm the numbers guy. I have a degree in physics, and I'm just trying to put all these things in perspective. And
there are no accurate numbers to capture the scope of this. In large part, it's because it's illegal behaviors. And so from a research background, it's very hard to measure things that are clandestine. With that said, a lot of the data that does exist will say that more exploitation is happening in labor sectors outside of the sex industry than within it, although a lot of local and national attention is paid to sex trafficking. And so we'll see a discrepancy, like in the report that came out of the mayor's task force in San Francisco. They were very clear saying, oh, we feel like the numbers around sex trafficking are higher than that of labor trafficking because members of this task force weren't really focusing on other types of labor exploitation. So it really is dependent upon what people are measuring and the definitions that they're using.
Is the solution for the two types may differ. For those, for example, who are being forced, you get the person who's forcing them to traffic themselves, as happened to Deborah. You get them away, and they're not going to go back. But you have that other 40% who are out there because this is how they knew how to make money, and you get them away from it, and they're likely to go back. So I think we have to look at these populations as different and having different solutions. If you can get back to me at some time, we can go over the statistics, the numbers, and try and figure out why everybody who reports on this seems to give a different number for what the problem is.
Just remember, if you need money, I am in share budgets of 5, so don't worry about the money.
Doing the reading for this, what I found is that nobody seems to have numbers that agree with anybody else.